He knocked his head and he started to bleed. And no one touched him, no one moved near him. By the time the police arrived, he was dead. So that, was very, very sad and painful for the family. But in the middle of that, I had to realize I'm not the only one. There's so many thousands, millions of families are impacted by this thing. And I have accountability and responsibility for a lot of people. I must stand up and be there for everyone. As well, there are people who are there for me. So it's a time where we put the experience in the middle of everything we do. The personal experience is important. The stakeholder experience is important. The employee experience is important. And the business experience, very important. And so it is all about balance. Let's learn together and let's share together. Thank you very much.
Great, great. Thank you so much. I see the questions are rolling in already. The numbers are increasing. Please, for everyone joining the call, go to the Q&A tab and drop your questions. So it's easier for me to read through and have all our panelists attend to the questions. Just before I allow the Vice President of the Institute, Mrs. Titilaya Kisanya, to share her thoughts, let me read out 2 questions so that our panelists can be thinking of what their answers would be, and then I'll take Titia Kisanya and then come back to the answer. So I'll read 2 very interesting questions here. Again, to everyone on the call, please go to the Q&A tab and drop your questions, not in the general chat room, so it's easier for us to track. Question 1 is very interesting. How can you lay off at this time without fulfilling the part of the contract of employment that says you either give a notice of termination of employment or pay in lieu of the notice? Very interesting question. And then the second one is, how do you justify pay for those working from home, which, if we have to be sincere with ourselves, is not all the time, and those who have to go into the office? So can there be some differences in pay structure? And if we are considering that, is that justified? I like all our panelists to be thinking about that as I allow Mrs. Titi Akisanya to just share our thoughts, and then we go on from here. So I think
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, good afternoon to you.
It's a delight to see all of you, and especially my dear Chizoba. And don't be jealous, CEO. It's a delight to see you and our panelists as well. So if you want to know why I've chosen Chizoba especially, you need to ask her after this session. So my perspective, this last 6 weeks has been interesting, I dare say. For those of us who haven't been able to go to the hairdressers to do our hair or to do our nails, so you can see my gray hair is all coming out and my real age is there, right? But you all know I'm a zillennial at heart. But one thing I'd like to say, I stopped using the word social distancing, because human beings, we are social in nature. God has created us to be relational. And God forbid, the day we socially distance, we're dead. So I prefer to use the word physical distancing. That's all what this 6 weeks has been about, not about social distancing. So I'd like everyone to reframe, delete, expunge, transform, whatever, So it's not about social distancing. It's about physical distancing. This last 6 weeks has been emotional, I dare say. You really don't know the test of these times until you have something close home. And I've had the unfortunate incidents of close members of families and friends passing on, either as a result of COVID. But one last one, last week, she's a diabetic patient. She just had a crisis and no hospital would take her, and which was unfortunate. So again, it's like, so part of our prayer point is never fall sick during this period though, because if you're sick, no hospital would take you. And so that led to her unfortunate death. But To bring it back home, as HR practitioners and I dare say as strategic business partners, I'm reminded of Albert Einstein's quotation that says, never let a good crisis go to waste. And being a transformation agent myself, I focus more on that quotation, to waste. And it's always exciting when I say that, yes, some people have lost jobs or losing jobs, or may lose jobs, but it's interesting how we've bounced back with a measure of resiliency. New jobs are being created, new opportunities are abounding. In the last 2 weeks, I've been saying, I hear the sound of rain. And this week, from yesterday, I started saying, I hear the sound of abundance of rain. What do I mean by that? The way we've all caught on to new ways of doing things is amazing. Having a funeral service online by Zoom. I mean, I sat by the panel myself for my cousin's husband's funeral, where from my home here, the funeral was in North Carolina in the US. His wife and son, they were in Antigua, and I was manning the webinar panel box in my home here. And it was as good as being there for all those that were present at that funeral from all over the world. So new things are being created, new businesses. I mean, and guess what? Our creativity just eludes me. Those Ankara face masks, right? And now it will become a dress code when we're invited. The next function is not just Ashwebi this, then they'll tell you of the part of the Ashwebi dress code is the face mask as well. And I just laugh. And that's what I mean by never let a good crisis go to waste, simply because tough times don't last, but tough people do. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just another cycle of change. Let's practice what we know. Let's practice what we teach as we go through that transformation through the cycle of change. This one too shall pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia. And I promise you, I can't see the gray hair. I can't see it. I can't see it. So I would like Barrister Talk go at that. I mean, give his thoughts on that first question. Whilst Chizoba and Busola can prepare their answers on the second one around, is there a possibility of us introducing some flexibility in pay structure to accommodate employees who are having to work from home against those who are having to go to work, and perhaps in different parts of the country as well? Barrister Talk, can you please go at that? Can you right now be allowed as an employer to terminate employment contract without, how do you do that? What's the right way to go about it now?
All right, thank you very much. Wait, to begin with, employment is essentially common law, part of the laws we inherited in line with our colonial history. However, employment has since gone beyond common law, and therefore today, in addition to contract, which is the common law, we have other forms of laws that also govern the employment domain. Statute, international law, and we have the new one that, whereas common law proved inadequate, contract is essentially private law. Public law has come to regulate employment relationship, but we have also found that even municipal law may not be sufficient. And that's why you find that both under the Industrial Code Act, Section 7, you also find under the Constitution that we can import international best practice into our workplace. And therefore, all these affect employment. And therefore, what determines an obligation at any given time will be based on a composite reading of all these laws together. Therefore, when you now narrow down to the question you asked, how can you terminate the employment of? Now, if you want to go under the common law, an employer has the right to hire and fire. That may come under some resistance in the sense that what is happening today, and when an employer wants to act based on that, it can be challenged because one, there is statutes which may give a weapon to an employee at this time. And therefore, to go through the direction of outright termination may be faced with challenges. An employer may now want to resort to redundancy under the statute, the Labor Act. However, the problem this will have is that if you look at the section on redundancy, section 20, in terms of what an employer must do when you want to carry out that exercise, there are certain obligations which are placed on the employer. But if you listen to the Minister of Labor, especially during his address on May 1, he had already hinted that he was going to make some regulations, and the law permits him. Because if you look at section 88 of the Labor Act, the minister can make regulations whenever he thinks that making such regulations will help fulfill the obligations of the law. And therefore, my recommendation to employers at this time will be that within the short-term period, especially this period that we're dealing with emergency lockdown, it may not be wise to go either by common law or to go by statute. The reason is that it will be challenged, and the sympathy of regulators, including the courts, will be in favor of such employees. And therefore, this may not be the time to exercise some of those prerogatives. That would be my take on this.
Just to write on that, and I'll come to you, Barrister Falabi, just to write on that, Chizoba, please. So to the business owner, a business leader, or the HR person who sees the obvious challenge of business continuity, what do we do? How do we go about having that conversation between the employer and the employee in such a way that we are all protected? The business survives the challenge, the business does not make decisions that are hard, and employees are in some way protected.
Okay, yesterday when I got the notification for this conversation, some of the things I was looking at, it's beyond the law. What are those things, beyond the law, and I like the way Uche puts it, that even the gods, even, the gods are going to be maybe against you. And I looked at it that, it's a very delicate balance for organizations and their employees. None of us in our wildest imagination ever imagined that we're going to be here. And the reason why this is extremely difficult is it's neither martial law, nor is it, a physical, is it a physical crisis that we found ourselves in. It's not war to say that, oh, when the war is over, we'll return to our normal situation. What we're dealing with is an unseen invasive force that takes over even the normal relationships that we have. A good example, anybody can be a vector. And because, your vectorship is not on your face, it makes it extremely difficult to manage the situation, which is the reason why, most of the global business activities have almost been crippled, as a result. And so for both employers and employees, there has to be that understanding of the current situation to realize that we are, for lack of another word, we're all in big trouble. the employer is not able to do what he needs to do, and the employee is not able to provide the services. And so there has to be conversations. But this is where a lot of the things that we have pushed in the last 10, 15 years are either going to come back to bite us or come back to enable us. And I'm going to share a few, just a few things to bear in mind, that makes this extremely difficult. So you've got the legal contracts, but there are psychological contracts which we have built with employees. And these psychological contracts have been based on, some promises, expectations that have been raised in the minds of the employees. Over the past 5, 10 years, as HR and as organizations, we've talked about employee engagement, and we've asked for discretionary effort. We want people to, an organization that is, we're all building cathedrals, we're no longer masons, and we asked a lot of people, psychologically and emotionally. We spent time talking about the organizational culture, looking at all those, shared values, shared behaviors. But much more importantly is, I like the way that Robert Richman describes culture in his book, The Culture Blueprint version 1.5. He says culture is a feeling, and that when you stripped it, the definitions of all the words, all the English and all the interactions and signs, what you essentially get is a feeling. So we've created this feeling with experiences, in the organization. We've talked about employee experiences. We've gone to moments that matter, those moments that impact, the experience that we have with the organizations, And so there's been a lot of work that we've done in terms of engaging the hearts, the spirits of our people. And then we come to this. And coming to this, there are decisions that have to be logical decisions that have got to be taken from the head. If the business is not making money, it's not making money, it's not. And there are things that we have raised in terms of the hats of the employees and how do we manage that. So if we have never shared our true financial positions, true situations with employees, is going to be extremely difficult for them to understand. So you are like a father in a house, you go to go and buy all the SUVs, but then you can't pay my school fees. You're telling me you can't pay my school fees. You're telling me I can't go to school. I can't make that connection between all these SUVs and then my little school fees not being able to be paid. So somewhere maybe we have raised the expectation that there was a reserve that the organization could have fallen on. And then we then now turn around and say that, hey, we've got to reduce the workforce. So what is the history of engagement with employees? If we have been having these conversations, it makes it easy. If we haven't been having these conversations, then it makes it extremely difficult because we then now need to be honest and truthful with people who do not trust us. So it's a very delicate and a very difficult thing. Most organizations want to deal with it from the head, the logical, the legal angle to it. However, the backlash of it is that even if it is only a few employees you let go, you've already created an experience in the minds of the people who are there that they are expendable. We're all in this. I made sacrifices in the past. I had done things in the past to build this organization. And then we just run into this kind of situation that it's not my fault. And, you can't even, manage for a few months. So it is a very delicate balance for organizations.
Great. But you stress the fact that organizations can have the conversations with their employees and find a common way forward.
Yes, and it depends on the conversations that they've had in the past. And, if organizations were used to having conversations, being as open as they can, and had built the culture of engaging employees. Okay. In fact, I was just last week, saying I was going to do a survey, with some clients and friends to find out how much time are they spending in brainstorming their responses to this. So response not in terms of what are we going to do, about our business, but what are the options for us? What new business models are going to emerge from this? What can we do, with the things that we're doing to make money? What are the new channels that, we need to quickly create so that, we can continue to do business? And these are conversations that you can also have with employees because, frankly, all the ideas are out there. It's just how to harness the ideas. And in engaging the employees, they can actually come up with mitigating plans, for, they may all decide, I did read on Twitter, a lawyer, saying that, oh, he wanted to pay his employees for April. And they came back and said, you know what, you would be home. We don't think we should get full pay. Maybe you should, we're thinking that you can pay us 30%.
Yeah.
And these were coming from employees. He did say he was going to pay the full salary, but at least have those conversations and see what comes out of it and how everybody can pull together to get through this crisis.
Great. So I'd like Barrister Afolabi to share your thoughts on this. However, as you do that, I see a number of questions around. Okay, so a lot of legal terms we've been hearing a lot around us lately, from force majeure to frustration of contract and things like that. So I'd like you to throw that perspective to the conversation. What are those terms? What do they mean? And what should be the expectation for employers and employees, even as we go about engagement contracts at this time?
Okay, thank you very much, Winga. The specific question I've been asked to address, I think before I get to it, let me before I get to that, let me probably just throw a bit more light on what Barrister Ato and then Mrs. Mojeku had just addressed. I think Barrister Ato, beautiful intervention from the legal perspective. I would not as much as try to perhaps go through those legal aspects that, strictly speaking, will probably come into play. But as I listen to Mrs. Mojeku, there is a particular thing that she emphasized: conversation, and what ultimately would be recommending in these present times and the unprecedented crisis that this global public health crisis has thrown upon everybody, not least the world of work. What ultimately engagement like this should be looking at is, what is the recommendation? What is the expectation of the law at this point? Barrister Ato had said earlier on that, well, for labor, it's not just municipal law anymore. I'm glad. It goes beyond municipal law. There are international laws for labor and employment space. So it is important we bear that in mind at every point in time. And in all of these, what the International Labour Organization has recommended is what is called social dialogue. We have a crisis on our hands. It is very unlikely that the employer and the employee would agree. It is very unlikely as to measures that will be taken to deal with the issues that are at hand. I mean, I'm traveled through a course to come through frustration, force majeure that you had mentioned. There is no denying the fact that in the wake of that global public health crisis and the far-reaching, reverberating effects on virtually everything, including but not limited to the world of work, there is a need to now begin to think of measures for businesses to remain in business. That is the truth, because not so much about redundancy, but the fact that the two measures that have been put in place to check the community transmission of that coronavirus pandemic have inevitably brought about the frustration of employment contracts. Because what you find is that, I talk about social distancing, I talk about lockdown that happened for about 6 weeks and it's still on a partial reopening. what that means is that it has affected the world of work, especially the physical world of work, as you will find defined in a lot of employment contracts. So inevitably, what the employer is forced with is to look at the situation where there was not so much work, or there was no work in April. So it begins to think of measures, like I said, inevitably to stay in business. And some of those measures, there are quite a number of them. But at the end of it, it is important to bear in mind, the discussion is an interrogation between economics and law. The discussion is an interrogation between economics and law for one major reason. One, at the end of all of this, businesses would now have to come up with imaginative solutions to be able to keep on liquidity ratio, capital outlay going. So businesses that would inevitably be faced with that do not want to start dealing with contingent claims arising from employment claims, where an employer takes a step such as, okay, because there's not been work, there should be a pay cut across board, or there should be job losses and all that, because of what ordinarily he feels has been brought about by the coronavirus pandemic. The point that must be borne in mind at every point in time is that the law emphasizes the need to consult the employee before some of these steps are brought about, especially so where the steps being taken were not contemplated and could not have been reduced into the contract of employment and or the employment manuals, employment handbook and all of that. So it is not expected that the employer, as he used to have the power, maybe under common law, or to a large extent under a 1974 enacted Labor Act, would just across board take a unilateral decision and say, we sack 100 or we apply a pay cut across board. That would inevitably open up the grim prospect of litigation and attendant damages where those claims are founded. So what I've always advised in the immediate is that if it is possible, if your capital outlay can maintain it, try not to reduce staff. Let's leave the discussion of job losses out of the equation in the immediate, and think of imaginative solution, imaginative measures that can be applied across board, but consult the employee. And what are some of these solutions? And they have been done elsewhere. There could be a pay cut. There could be a pay cut. There could be a deferment or deferring on increments in salaries, payments of bonuses, promotion, unpaid leave, supplanting the annual leave, the vacation of staff that they ordinarily still have in the course of the year, with the 3-4 weeks lockdown that they spent at home. But again, like I said, it cannot be a unilateral decision. It was not in the employment contract. So what do? You consult. And interestingly, like I said earlier on, at the end of the day, it is not going to be what the municipal law says. What the court, faced with fact scenario, ultimately or dispute, will look at is, if our laws are insufficient, the law court, the National Industrial Court, is entitled, is well empowered under Section 254 of the Constitution to travel abroad, loosely speaking, to say what would be international best practices in the circumstance. And let me give you an instance of the international best practices. As early as February, British Airways realized that this is probably going to happen and started engaging its over 30,000 workforce worldwide. 30,000 workforce. So they had an engagement that took, at the level of the unions, in some of the discussions, it came down to even individual employees. And the discussion continued for about 6 weeks. They reached an agreement that there should be a pay cut of 20% for 3 months in the immediate, and depending on how you go, there should be ultimately maybe there can be job losses and all of that. Now, let us apply that home. Let us apply that to our scenario here. You've heard about aviation business. You've heard about some aviation businesses, what they've been doing and all of that. And I'm just thinking to myself, if a staff affected by any of these policies that were unilaterally taken across board takes the case to court, the lawyer, the advocacy will not turn on, oh, this is what the Labor Act says alone. The advocacy will be looking at international best practices, what obtains elsewhere, what obtains abroad, and is perfectly entitled to bring what happened in the British Airways scenario that I've just given. So it is an engagement that must be across board. Now, let me just perhaps try and relate it with the specific question of force majeure. Force majeure is a development of the law and then shorn of the legal niceties, technicalities. I'll just explain it that parties agree. Every employment is a contract. Parties agree beforehand that in the event that what we're entering into, this contractual obligation, there are foreseeable or unforeseen circumstances that come into play, an act of God, then it will be deemed that we are both released from fulfilling obligations in the contract, in a very simple term. But again, why that may not be applicable here, it is applicable in civil law jurisdiction that you need not have expressed it in your contract. Civil law, in civil law jurisdiction like France, in a common law jurisdiction like Nigeria, it must have been anticipated that this is, and it must have been put in the employment contract. I've seen a lot of employment contract, and you hardly find force majeure incorporated in the employment contract to start with. And the decisions now, in any event, is that force majeure, apart from it being expressed, must have anticipated a crisis, an act of God of such a proportion as a pandemic and not necessarily an epidemic.
Interesting.
So, I mean, there are scenarios that, yes, it's been thrown around, but it is not immediately applicable. Then on the twin hand, there is frustration of contract, common law approach, and all of that. In all of that, what is important to always bear in mind is that unlike the many other scenarios, labor and employment is sui generis in Nigeria now. It is the adjudication. This is almost about the only subject matter that I know that the constitution of the country, which is the supreme law of the land, has given the judges looking into matters relating to employment dispute, to not just restrict themselves to the local laws, to look at international conventions that Nigeria have ratified, to look at, in certain scenarios, to look at international best practice, as long as it can be situated within particular fact scenario of cases coming before the court, and which they can label unfair labor practice and all of it. The test is, whatever measure is being applied, has it gone through a fair and transparent process of engagement? In one of the cases, the industrial court had called it participatory democracy. Labor has gone from the status, or has evolved from the status where the employee is seen just as another factor of production. At the time it was coming in, it really didn't get an opportunity to negotiate majorly the terms. But the moment it comes in, if there is a need to alter the scenario, even if it was on account of the global public health crisis as we're faced with, there is a need for an engagement. But please, I will qualify that, because I've equally seen a lot of literature saying that, look, there must be consent. The employee must give consent before you can apply it. No, that is not what ILO preaches. ILO preaches, let us put a process. Let us see that there's a dialogue. And as long as you can sustain that, you've tried to make the employee see reason that liquidity ratio, capital outlay can just not justify us paying full salary in a month. That would have satisfied that particular requirement. So
fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you on a part that's I see a question related to it, but I'll go to the registrar CEO. The earlier question I gave you, is it a good time to introduce some changes to payment structure and some level of flexibility? What's your thoughts on that?
So in my view, I think indeed that we are in times when the creativity and innovation of our processes and our practices is being called upon at very significant levels. I remember, similarly when we started talking about flexi time, it was a big buzz. Everyone was saying flexi is good and everything. And consistently in the organizations I worked with, there was always a blocker. It was that supervisors did not want to support flexi time because basically they felt, in summary, That the minute an employee is out of my reach and out of my eyesight, out of the same physical space I am in, then automatically they are not working. And I found that ridiculous, because I asked the question, what tells you that that employee that is sitting behind the desk in your office under your nose is actually doing any work at all in the same physical space? I call it out of body experiences. So many people come to work at 8 a.m. They're actually, once they drop their bag or their folder at their desk, they have gone into Balogun Market or Toyota in Oshodi. They are selling spare parts, or they're on the stock exchange. They're selling the trading shares. They've spaced out. So it's not about being in the same physical environment. It's about affiliation and connectedness. That's what is important. Second of all, it is, what are you really measuring? Is it presence or is it output? Is it impact? Is it results? Is it the outcomes that jobs are meant to deliver? So that is where this conversation starts. Therefore, in a situation where we are now all remote working, again, there's a difference between go home and go and work from home. I said, look, work is work. The workplace is the workplace. Wherever someone can connect to the internet or a computer and get their work done is the office. It does not have to be a particular workspace designated. So therefore, if we have said work from home, then my expectation is that people are working from home, and that the supervisors and the managers and the leaders are making sure that the activities that people need to deliver, they are getting delivered. The connection, the conversation, all of that stuff is going on. The difference is the channels are different. Not face-to-face, it is now virtual. So that is important. So if someone is working from home, and certain others, because there are certain critical jobs as well that may need to still report at the physical location, for example, factory workers. If someone is working from home and someone is working from in a factory, work is work. I see absolutely no reason or rationale to cut the pay of the person that is working from home. And now to the people who are at home and there is no work to be done. So this goes back to what Barrister Folabi just spoke with, Mr. Folabi Kuti just talked about. The employer is not able to provide work, therefore there is no work for the employee to do. It is not, in my view, the fault of the employee, neither is it the fault of the employer, possibly because, we have this pandemic around us and, there's a lot that we want to do that we are unable to do. But I will first challenge the employer and the supervisors to think about the ways in which they have traditionally done work. Have they actually looked at that? Is it just because mindsets are very powerful things? Is it because the person is not in the physical space that we assume that there is no work to be done? Because we must first go through the jobs and the activities in our organizations and figure out the ones that can actually be done in different ways. Myself and my team, my entire organizations, we are surprised at how much we are actually able to deliver, that we have actually delivered in the past 6 weeks while working from home. And I believe a lot is actually doable. So every organization, HR professionals, MD CEOs, and us employees ourselves, first of all, figure out, this is my job. These are the responsibilities of my job. Are there things I can actually do from home? And then are there other things my organization needs at this time that may not necessarily be in my job description? Can I step up, step in and help my organization succeed during these difficult times? Have we asked all of those questions? If we have, and the answer is still then that there is no work, and therefore, the employer is not able to provide work, the employee is not able to do work, then we move into the engagement space that Mr. Folabi was talking about. The employee here needs to call the employees together and, have that conversation and look even at, okay, so struggling, we can't pay, there's no money coming in. Can we defer? Let's put a moratorium in quotes on the need to deliver work and to get paid, or let us even, reduce pay. There's so many things we can do before we get to a point where we say, oh, we're going to terminate and lay off staff. So there are many, many things that can be done. There are certain allowances that we may decide to defer. I mean, if I pay transportation allowance because I know my employees will get into public transport and so on to get to work, but they are now working from home, it is a part of the contract. So I must bear that in mind. Have the conversation. Can I freeze the transportation piece and save it for you until a time when our revenues grow, the pandemic is over, then I can reimburse you. So I will be your bank for this period as your employer. You know, you can have those conversations and explore all sorts of creative and, you know, different things that would also limit the pain on the employee as much as is possible, at the same time putting the business in context. So that is how I would look at that, GT. Thank you.
Great. Listening and allowing the conversations. I've got a number of questions and some of our members wanting to ask a live question. So permit me to distribute questions and give us about 10, 15 seconds to answer as panelists, right? So we can get through. The numbers are just going up and going. Thanks a lot to everyone who's joining. So to Chizoba, I'll give you a question. How do you manage? So I've got someone sent in a question. I've got a lot of staff who do field work. What should I do to manage cost and manage their performance? They can't work from home. They have to be on the field. What do I do in these times? I'd like you to go, please. 10, 15 seconds.
Okay. Just like the CEO registrar said, you know, it's about understanding the nature of the work that they have to do in the field.
Okay.
If you understand the nature of the work that they have to do in the field, what needs to be done in the field and what needs to be done off the field. So there are, and then to also reimagine some of this work, because if you look at what we talk about field, if there is a lockdown, who is the field? You can't go into people's houses, you can't go do whatever it is that you were doing. So you need to sit down and look at that work, what needs to happen and what doesn't need to happen. And then there are conversations that you're going to have. You need to recognize the difficulties, you know, the difficulties they are going to have, but you also need to be very mindful of the health and safety implications of them being out in the field. They've got to be safe for them to be able to do the work. And so those are conversations that need to have. I keep emphasizing conversation because it's when we understand the nature of the dangers that they face through conversations, through, you know, stripping it of some of the emotions that come through it. There is a place for emotion, there is a place for facts.
Great, great. Barrister Uche Ato, I'll give you the next question, but let me read the follow-on question that I would like Barrister Folabi to read. So to you, Barrister Ato, the question is, as an HR professional, okay, so the question is it advisable for an employer to cut salaries and yet suspend an employee for violation of company policy whilst the employee is facing a reduction in salaries? And yeah, can I still go ahead and suspend that employee for a violation of company policy? To Barrister Folabi, you can prepare to answer your question afterwards. In drafting a letter of employment to a new staff, will it be advisable to inform he or she that though the pay is, say, 500,000 monthly, he or she will be paid 50% of that upon resumption because of the crisis? So there's almost like a difference in what you're, very interesting question. So Barrister Uche, please go ahead.
All right, well, thanks. Before I answer that question directly, let me just take 1 minute to make one comment.
I'll give you 30 seconds, sir. 30 seconds.
All right, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the first is that remote work is not new. And therefore, since it's been with us for a while in the world, international jurisprudence has developed around it. There are 3 areas where international jurisprudence are very clear, is clear on remote work. One, that the first issue you must settle relates to eligibility. Second, availability. And the third relates to the question some of my colleagues have answered. And that question is the issue of discrimination. On no account from international jurisprudence must you organize your workplace in a way that it appears that people who work from home or from remote locations are treated differently. This had always been the battleground, especially where traditional enemies of remote work, like trade union, will oppose it. And therefore, as we go into this area, we need to be very careful in terms of pay. It's an area where we require a lot of guidance from international jurisprudence, and it is actually available. The other issue on the question of force majeure, questions have continued to come from that area. Does it apply to employment? Under common law, theoretically, yes. But if you look at Section 17 of the Labor Act, it has removed that in the sense that statute has already said what you must do in the event of force majeure. That is, you need the intervention of Ministry of Labor, and therefore it does not apply to employment, especially in Nigeria. Now, on the issue of the question you asked, in terms of an employee who has suffered, for instance, a court, and remember that it is a contractual obligation, and therefore, if you have, for any reason, you have to slash or to cut, it must be with the consent of the employee, one way or the other. And in any case, if it is a matter of deferred payment that we only pay in a proportion, even without his consent, the only thing is I'll defer it. But in terms of like 30% outright cut, you have seen the example of all those footballers where the premiership, they say, what can it has to be done. However, the main problem now is that we have seen situations, even in Nigeria, where you cut by that percentage. The workers will believe that because you have slashed it, and therefore that we have every moral reason to now deliver based on the proportion you are paying. They believe it is now a moral issue, that after all, you're paying me 70%. And therefore, how do you expect this is a contribution? Because remember, the contract is still intact. And because it is a moral issue, this is where social dialogue comes in. And then, if you permit me 10 seconds, I will just mention what 5 seconds. If you look at on the 18th of March, the ILO has issued an interim report on what must happen in the workplace based on COVID-19. There are 3 areas where the ILO says that social dialogue must take place. One, it talked about safety in the workplace, to and from work, where you must engage. 2, the question of stimulating demand, that is supply side. How do we keep the company alive? And the 3rd is that dialogue must take place in the area of what? Maintaining the job. And that's where he suggested staggered work, cutting salaries, and all those. He said these are areas that social dialogue must resolve. Thank you for your kindness.
Great, great. Thank you so much. And whilst you are going for your question, I like so having reduced salary to by any percentage, who bears the cost of power and data to get the remaining work done, even if you're doing it at 50% or 100%, like Barrister Uche just said. So, Mr. Barrister Folabi rather, please go ahead and answer your question.
So sorry, please, could you just repeat that again? Who bears what?
Sorry, I was saying, no.
Yes.
So the question to you is, an employee is resuming on a job and you've been told your salary is say 500,000, but you will be paid 250,000 because we are implementing a cut in pay because of COVID-19. Is that right? And what sort of conversation should the employer and the employee be having? And then the other question is not to you, but the registrar CEO, to say, having provided the slash in salaries, who bears the cost for data and power generation to get the work done since I'm working from home?
All right, thank you. My answer will be twofold, and if I have the time, if you give me a bit of some seconds afterward, I still want to address one other issue that came up just now. Okay, one thing we must always bear in mind, you see, the context of discussion should look at the new phase of work, the new labor jurisprudence. the new labor jurisprudence to some extent has now come to interfere and a bit empower the employee in some areas. And it is important at every point in time that HR professionals, employers, they bear that in mind. The employment contract guides through and through the relationship between parties. And the employment contract would include what was discussed and what was put across in the offer letter, which was accepted, and the employment handbook. If there would be a deviation in it, there's a need to consult or to discuss, have a conversation around it, dialogue. When I made emphasis on an ILO dialogue, I wasn't just limiting to ILO's document to guide relations during the period of COVID-19, which only came out last month. I was referring, in effect, to the ILO decent work agenda, which remains in place at every point in time. And it was the interpretation around the ILO decent work agenda that gave rise to what we now know as pre-employment rights. Before now, we never had pre-employment rights. Employment rights and post-employment rights. Pre-employment rights, even before the employee has resumed work, but the contract had actually been put in place, and perhaps he has acted on that to disengage from his former employment, to get in place and all of that. The employer is bound, the new employer is bound to keep to that contract. Where, however, because of the novel situation that has arisen and makes it impracticable to keep strictly to it, then there is a need to have a conversation. So that is what. As to who bears the cost of data and all of that, inevitably, that is the employer. You see, what we should be looking at this point is that we now have a novel situation that is giving all of us, HR professionals especially, an opportunity to revisit the handbook.
Yeah.
An opportunity. I had an opportunity to review a case the other day. I can tell you the position of the industrial court based on a decision made last year on salary reduction. The position now is that unless there is a discussion or it was envisaged in the handbook, the employer cannot go ahead and reduce salary. And the argument was put forward, beautiful, as it made seem, that to the extent that the employer is not consulting the employee when it is time to have a pay increase, why should it be when it is time to have a pay increase? And the position was that, yes, once you come to work, there's an expectation interest, expectation right around the fact that you will rise, around the fact that you would at some point have a salary increase. Not an expectation that there'll be a decrease. So what do we do in the circumstance? You revisit the handbook where it will become necessary, as in a situation of this nature, it must be expressly stated there. So in the absence of that, it is borne by the employer. Then there's a little information that is important, that is very crucial, we must bear in mind. Now, one of the novel issues that has been thrown up now, with even talking about data and all of that, is that work is now being carried on remotely. Work is now being carried on remotely. Inevitably, there are a number of legal considerations that the employer must also take into consideration. Interestingly, the UK Supreme Court on the 1st of April just made a determination in a case around that. To what extent can an employer even be liable, vicarious liability, as to the way the employee uses the data at home when he's not there? Do not forget, we have a data protection. Sorry?
Remember, there's Netflix to watch.
Sorry. Hello?
Remember, there's Netflix to watch.
Oh, absolutely.
Hello, can you hear me?
So, yes, I can hear you. So some of those things are there. In fact, in that case, one of the main things that came up had to do with Morrison Supermarket is a huge chain of supermarket. It's a case involving Morrison Supermarket. As to the data, before now, we didn't have an equivalent of the Data Protection Act that they have in the UK. We now have it. So employer must bear in mind that there's a data controller. There's a limit So what anybody can do about information relating to anybody, third parties especially, without obtaining their consent, third parties become data controller. Now, you have an employee who you don't even know. We are just talking about remote work. There are quite a number of legal considerations that could still throw the employer, if care is not taken, open to huge damages. So it is now time to revisit the handbook. All of these things are not in any handbook.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To what can he be said to be acting within the remit of his work? Those are some of the conversations that have been thrown up, and it's very necessary.
Fantastic. We've got about 15 minutes more to go, but I'd like the registrar CEO to attend to our question whilst Chizoba can be preparing to answer this. So these changes in salaries and negotiations that we're having, must it now be documented? Are we going to have a situation where I will possibly have 2 employment letters or something? I'd like you to prepare to attend to that. And also, now that work has come home, what's going to happen to health-related concerns that I may have as an employee? Who bears the cost for health concerns or accidents and things like that? Registrar CEO, I'd like you to go, please.
Thanks. So, just riding on the back of what Mr. Kuti has been saying, I believe my question is, who bears the cost of data and all of that at home?
Yes, yes.
I see it as a work tool, okay? We live in a digital world. Data is life. Data equals work. Without data, we cannot get our work done in most cases. So if we look into the laws, employers have an obligation to provide work and to provide equipment that employees need to get their work done. It's an obligation. So data equals equipment, tool, whatever it is we want to call it. An employer has an obligation to make sure what an employee needs in order to carry out their job duties is available. Obligation. We cannot run away from it. The other side to it, though, is then, okay, so because there's this pandemic, everyone, revenue's not coming in, budgets are tight, bank accounts are drying out. What can we do? HR professionals, where are your thinking caps? We are supposed to be the best, innovative, creative, and all of that. We all know that most, if not all, networks provide free data at night. True or false? Free. I get those SMS alerts and it's like, you can browse from this time to that time, 4-5 hours at night without spending 1 kobo. Have we thought about restructuring work such that people who want to work I am very creative at night. I think all the answers to my life's problems and work problems, they come to me in dreams and visions in the middle of the night. So I am very creative at night. I like to stay awake at night. Somehow I think God is closer to me in the middle of the night than during the day. So I like to work at night. And if I can get work done at night, free, zero cost data, win-win situation. So HR professionals, why don't you just talk to your staff and ask them what they like to do? Okay, on which side of the divide are you? Are you the kind of person that likes to work at night, or do you prefer daytime? To those that work at night, free data. To those that work during the day, you pay data, everything, last, we are all right. So that is my own view on that one. I think it takes creativity. Again, this whole conversation, get to know your employees, provide options. There are different ways of skinning a cat, of getting something done. Honestly, we can win on all sides if we think differently about these things.
And I'm sure everyone that is on the call can imagine what it is like now reporting to a CEO who is always up in the night, right? That's just an aside joke. But again, public announcement to everyone. I want to announce that you start looking forward to interesting learning sessions that you can be a part of. CIPM will be announcing a number of changes to our learning interventions, where imagine being in a series of micro learning sessions with this sort of rich panel. There's a lot coming, and I'd like you to look forward to it. So please, Chizoba, I see that you're ready to go on your own question. What's it going to be like?
I can't remember the question.
2 letters?
What was the question?
So the question is, so we've emphasized the need for us to have engagement and communicate with staff. Once that is done and there's an agreement in place, must this now be documented? And you're going to have a situation where I possibly resume saying my salary will be XYZ, but in reality, I'm now earning Z. Must we document that in a way to protect employers, maybe?
Okay. I'm going to go back and disagree with the CEO on the data. And the reason why I'm going to disagree with the CEO on data is it's not all the time that data will be provided. Sometimes when people elect to work from home, especially if people had a choice, you have the data, you provide the data yourself because you elected to work from home. And then in this particular situation, I've had people ask, but you're not, why are people earning transport allowance if they're sitting in their houses? So, those are still conversations that still need to be had so that everybody's on the same page and in terms of agreement on that. And then in terms of night and day working, it depends on the work. And I would encourage people to read the book by Daniel Pink that say the title of the book is When. So, we all have different circadian cycles that operate, and we need to bear that in mind, know yourself, but also know the people that you work with so that you don't cross the boundaries with them. But for those who are working from home, I'm providing generator, I'm providing the office, I've got to have the new world of work, you have to outfit a room. So if you're looking for a house now, if you were looking for a 3-bedroom before, maybe you need to look for a 4th bedroom because you're going to have your office in your house. And then you have to have the generator, you have to run it. So for those who are working from home, it's not an easier option, for people who think, okay, because I have to get into the office, they're having a good time. I was just talking to somebody, for those of us who are single, there is a blurring of lines, between work and life. So I find myself now by 8 o'clock in the morning, I actually travel in my Lamborghini, across my bedroom into my new office, and then get into that office. And I don't leave that office until about 11. I have to try and remind myself, to take a lunch break, to walk around, because there is just so much that one is doing. So I don't go, because we don't go anywhere. I don't have dates, even though, I'm putting up my hands now, you can date me virtually. So, we don't have dates, we don't have drinks, we don't have a dinner with people. And so you're forced to sit in the office, and we all have to bear that in mind. Now, when you've had all these conversations, it's very important to document. Documenting not for the sake of just the employer, but for the employee, because there are promises that, on both sides that have been made. So you're cutting my salary, when is that salary going to be reinstated and stuff? So that tomorrow, God forbid, the manager succumbs to death by COVID, then there is nothing, that is documented, and there's nobody to understand what both parties agreed to. So I always say documentation, but when we document, if we document with a legalistic mindset, then it creates problems eventually. If we document because both of us, this is our agreement, this is what we both agreed, so in everything that we are doing, I always just remind managers, remind HR people, it's hard. Take decisions from the head, implement it from the heart. Even if people agree that they have to be fired, please don't fire me with an email. Don't fire me on a Zoom call. Please waste that your credit. Give me a call. Let's have a conversation and leave room for a relationship tomorrow. So the way we do things, matter is really not just about the decision, but about the way it's implemented.
Great. I've got 2 more questions, and one of our elected council members wants to share a point. It's Kumbia Deoti. We'll have you just quickly jump in and make your call. But there's this question that I love. Can an organization temporarily suspend some employees' contract? This organization does not want to lay off staff because they suspect that in a matter of weeks to months, there'll be some gradual resumption to work and business? What will be the approach? I like our two barristers to attend to that question quickly, and then we will take a call from Ms. Kumbia Adeoti. Can we suspend employees' contract temporarily with the hope? We don't want to lay off. What should we do? Okay, Barrister Ato, can you please give it a go? Still. Oh, sorry, I think it dropped off. Barrister Falabi, please go ahead.
Okay, well, just like I indicated earlier, everything is largely within the remit of contract. The answer is yes, but it is important that we look at whether this is envisaged in a contract of the parties, and if it is not, have a conversation around this. And I think what is important is that the emphasis is not that the employee has been empowered to always insist at every point in time that certain measures cannot be put in place to make the business or keep the business in business. The emphasis is that dialogue. And because I was reading a comment and I noted that somebody had said, look, it is not just dialogue, it is a dialogue and there must be consent. No, what the ILO decent work agenda says is that have a dialogue with a view towards reaching a consensus. So you may not reach a consensus on it. So yes, that you can put in place. That's why initially I mentioned that the conversation is, and it revolves around or evolves around economics as well as law. So if the outlay, the capital outlay or liquidity would inevitably necessitate an economic measure or suspending certain contract, have the conversation and put it in place. What is important, like I said, is that there must be a fair and transparent process in place towards reaching that. So yes, that is doable, that's possible. But again, like I emphasized the other time, this is about the time to now, coronavirus pandemic has thrown up a lot of issues. But one key thing that I've been emphasizing is that this is a time for HR professionals to go back and revisit the handbook, the manual. It's everything. This is like a takeaway. So a lot of these things would have been covered. A lot of these things would have been, oh, these are instances for these instances. I mean, a takeaway of this, for example, should be that. Then I heard earlier on the issue about virtual work and all of that. Again, contract. You probably find out that you don't have any provision relating to remote work in the handbook. Employer must be careful. Is there a need to now go and have policies specifically stated that certain work, because this is the new age, this is the new normal. So it is equally time to just revisit and make sure that this provision, so it becomes contract of parties.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. And we just got a comment from our friends, even from the UK, commenting on what you just said. So thanks a lot for that. I'm really enjoying this session, but I know we've got to go in a matter of minutes. But we'll take last words and comments from everyone. Yeah, so please, let's have Ms. Kumbia Adeoti give a comment. She's on now. Hello. Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, just give me a sec.
Okay.
We'd like to take your contribution, please, Mrs. Kumbia Adeoti. You are on now. Sorry. While we wait to resolve whatever technical issue we might be having, can we please take last words or contributions from everyone? I'd like to do ladies first. So please, Chizoba, I'd like you to go. Last comments, last words, any takeaway, key action points that anyone can take from this session. Sorry. You need to unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I keep
Okay,
forgetting that. There are a few things, you know, that there are two key lessons that I've learned from this COVID. One is you're not okay if your neighbor is not okay. And two is neighbor is no longer defined by geographic location. So what happened in Wuhan is what's impacting every single one of us. So there is a ripple effect of every single action that we have that we've got to bear that in mind, whether as an organization or as individuals in organization. And to be able to get out of every situation that we find ourselves in, you know, during this era, post this era, is collaboration. No solution to COVID is going to come from individuals. And so we all need to collaborate across industries, whether we used to be traditional competitors, we need to find a way of collaborating, you know, to be able to get out of this. And my last words, you know, having heard Uche and Folabi and the CEO speak, is every single day is a learning, you know, for us through this. And I would want all organizations to start keeping like a journal, whether it's a video log or it's a blog or a journal, you know, of what the leadership decisions, leadership thought process throughout this period, because these are historic documents. The reason why we know what happened in 1918 and 1919 is because people documented it. We need to start documenting in our organizations because this will guide future generations in terms of where if they have a widespread or global crisis like we have found ourselves in. And one of the things I'm working away, go back and look at your documentation and start inserting the things on a daily basis as we're learning, start inserting the policies that will guide. And please, those things are not cast in stone. By next week, in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks, we may be able to find things that, you know, worked in the first week that are not working in these later weeks, you know, but we need to be very dynamic and agile in all the things that we're doing. And I'd like to thank all the panelists for increasing my knowledge this afternoon, and I'm really feeling excited, you know, about what I'm going to be sharing with my clients. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we can take Ms. Kumbia Delty now.
Yes, Benga.
Okay.
Sorry, the system told me wow. So I'm going to have to do some catching up.
It's the reality of what we all face. It's okay. So, but you can just give it a go.
Okay.
You have a contribution or a question, please?
None at the moment.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, I'd like to go to, I'll come back to my registrar CEO to help us do a wrap up. So I'd like to go to Barrister Uche Ato. Last words, action points, what would you ask people to go do after this session?
All right, thank you very much. Just draw attention to the speech by the Honorable Minister on the 1st of May, where he talked about how the ministry, which is the chief regulator of employment in Nigeria, will approach this issue. He actually drew attention to the question of relying on the decent work agenda of the ILO. The decent work agenda of the ILO was adopted in 1999, and some of the issues there that are important for this moment is that apart from those standards of the ILO, he talked about work that must meet certain basic needs of the individual, including the need for social integration. Therefore, one of the things he said clearly, and which I think must be a takeaway today, is that when we talk about social dialogue, under the decent work agenda. What the ILO has in mind is a tripartite dialogue. And therefore, the minister wants to lead this by way of making some regulations that will guide all the parties within this period. But it has to be within the context of bringing in all the social partners in the form of dialogue. Finally, I will just add something. And why this is important is that every employer has an opportunity this time to be ahead of the regulators and to avoid the kind of embarrassment that many employers run into on the issue of outsourcing. If you remember a number of decisions that came even from the Supreme Court on the question of outsourcing, I think this is the time that employers must get this right from the very beginning, because it is not just enough to say, okay, we're going into remote working without adequate preparation in terms of having a strong legal basis. This is the time for us to draw from international best practice as we craft our policies, as we craft contracts, because you cannot build a new system of work on nothing or build it on something that is no longer appropriate. We must draw from international jurisprudence to guide us. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, sir. Barrister Falabi Kuti, last words. You need to unmute yourself, please.
Okay, sorry. Yes,
great.
okay, yes. I just like to draw attention that it's been an engaging session, quite insightful on quite a number of things raised. I'm taking away a couple of things. But more importantly, I just cast my mind back, and it does appear that the intervention here, maybe on account of time, limited time and all of that, has largely been around measures that can be put in place, economic measures. And I just thought that perhaps this is the time to chip in the gravity of the crisis that we have on our hand. And we're talking about a global public health crisis. And the global public health crisis, part of what we should be looking at is ensuring that we provide at every point in time a secure, safe, and healthy environment for the employees. A secure, safe, and healthy environment for the employees. I cannot overemphasize that. And then this reason, I would like to make in the my last comment on this because of what happened yesterday. Yesterday happened to be the first day of resumption of partial lockdown in many cities like Lagos and Abuja. So expectedly or predictably, there was bound to be a spike in the number of bank customers attending the banks for in-person banking transactions. Of course, one has listened to commentaries querying what people were doing in the banks when there were digital platforms to carry out banking transactions. And my response is simply that, is it that we feign ignorance or we genuinely do not know that only a tiny fraction of Nigerians use online banking services due to a number of factors, awareness to security and trust issues, cost of data, internet infrastructure.
Yeah.
And besides, it was reported that over 6 million debit cards got expired in April alone. And we all know that in this part of the world, you must make physical appearance in a banking facility to renew or get those cards. So it inevitably was a no-brainer that the banks would be crowded yesterday. And what do we have? We have scary, disturbing videos of customers milling around the banks. And then the banking laws were open to keep a minimal of 4 persons. And then one was wondering, now the customers who were coming in to maintain the social distance within the banking premises were the same persons who were milling in crowd, rubbing bodies, hands against opportunistic infections. And eventually they came into the bank. So I was thinking about it this morning that to start with, all the bankers who attended those facilities yesterday, they were compromised. I mean, if it was in a normal climate, they probably would be isolated because they came in contact, close in contact with opportunistic infections and all that. So it draws back to when we talk about safe, secure, and healthy environment, it has bigger ramifications that at every point in time must be thought through and must be not just reduced into the book, must be implemented, especially at a time when we are talking of a global public health crisis that is of this nature. and anybody could easily contract it in the process. So, I mean, in addition, I just thought that it's something to bear in mind for HR professionals.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's a very interesting perspective. With the permission of the CEO, I would treat the comments and the comments from the vice that they will answer. No, thank you so much. I've been getting a lot of comments. Some HR people are actually having meetings and discussing what to do with employees, and some of our answers has been so insightful that they are, oh, great. President is also on the call now, and I know he had, he was going to give a comment on what we've been talking about. So I'll give Registrar CEO a question, the Vice President a question, and then we'll have the President give his final thoughts. It's been a very busy, engaging period for him. So the question to you, CEO, is, in light of the fact that a number of organizations are implementing a salary cut and we're working remotely, and to a number of organizations or a number of employees working in certain sectors, they've sort of got more time on their hands. Is this a time to begin to think about allowing employees have multiple work engagements? It's a question that I've seen, and some people have been buzzing me privately to say, I must make sure that this question is addressed. I'd like your thoughts on that.
So I've been a millennial, zillennial, whatever.
Most likely,
so many years.
Disease and the names have started.
You know, I've been there. Look, I don't see any reason why not, personally speaking. So people have been side hustling for generations. Gen X's, they've been side hustling. It's just that it was under the table side hustling. So working full time with a company that has hired them, having their side gig, you know, with whether it's consulting on the low or whatever they were doing. In today, you know, this age and time, particularly the millennials, they want to do so many varied things. And in the developed world, you know, much more than here, there are different types of employment contracts that actually allow you now to be employed legally by different organizations. Digital has made that possible. If you've been a consultant before, I've been a consultant, you know that yes, you're employed by the consulting firm that has hired you, but the truth is you're working for so many different organizations on different projects. And so what is happening now is remove the consulting firm that has hired you directly, and you now have that opportunity to provide your expertise, your skills to a number of different organizations. I personally believe that the time is ripe to do that. Why? You've said employees have time on their hands. So if employees have time on their hands, what stops them from doing a bit here and a bit there, so long as you're not dealing with IP protected content, you're not revealing trade secrets, and so long as those things can be guaranteed. So therefore, before it becomes mainstream, the legal side of it must be sorted out, both in terms of our laws as a country, looking at all the different ramifications of employees working for multiple employers, then we can make it mainstream. And then organizations, second point, organizations are saying, we don't have enough money, we don't have revenues, but there is work that needs to be done. So instead of hiring someone full-time, how come you're not thinking about having someone that can give you 3 hours, maybe each day or every other day, and you still get value for what you need to get done? So long as we've protected risk, okay, risk management is very, very important. And we need to get our legal practitioners involved in it, have the right contracts in place, have the right enabling laws as a nation. And honestly, I think personally that the economy will bloom. So Glassdoor, for example, is a site through which you can actually go there and you can get jobs for different organizations. You can sit in Nigeria and you can do work abroad and get paid in dollars. I will land by saying, if you're currently employed by one particular organization, you know the terms and conditions under which you have been employed. Whatever decisions you take, whatever things you want to do not violate, because trust and integrity are very, very important. You can figure out your path to becoming a consultant that can have multiple employers until such a time where this multiple employment contract becomes mainstream in Nigeria. So that's what I would say. Yes.
Thank you so much, CEO. Again, like I said, President is going to come on the call and give his final thoughts. So the only one we accept as the official millennial on the council, Vice President Titi Akisai. My question to you that you'll also use to give your final thoughts is that, so I've got someone who says, a staff was granted approval to commence his annual leave on the 30th of March 2020. However, the president announced the lockdown on the 29th. What happens to that staff, considering he already got his approval to go on leave? Interesting question, but I've been mandated to make sure I put it up for an answer. So, Vice President, I'd like you to give that a go. She's still, I know she's still on the call. Yeah. And then we'll take final thoughts from the President and Chairman of Council. Okay. Hello, I think I'm not too sure she's still on the call. Okay. Okay. Good to have you on, sir.
Thank you, GT.
Okay. Okay. Pleasure. I'm not too sure Vice President is still on the call, but while we wait for her, will any of the panelists like to please attend to that question? And it touches things around benefits as well. I've gotten approval to go on leave, and then there's the lockdown, or there's a reduction in work hours requested of me. What should I do?
Okay.
Okay, I think I heard. Okay. Okay, so by
let me just say something concerning leave. Leave is a statutory entitlement of every employee, but it has to be at the convenience of the employer, in the sense that it is the employer who creates work, who also will assign work. And that's why an employer can even recall somebody who is on leave. So the fact that there is a lockdown does not mean that work is not going on. And therefore, the fact that he has already been granted permission to go on leave, that leave is still valid. The fact of the lockdown does not mean that the leave has been invalidated. The leave is legitimate and is in line with statutes, and therefore he can still continue. That is the situation.
Okay, thank you very much. I see Chizoba really wanting to say something on that. I'll allow you for just 5 seconds.
That's the head talking. Now let's talk from the heart.
Okay.
Okay. So approval's been given for my leave, but I'm stuck at home just like everyone else, and I can't, I really can't enjoy the leave because we are all in the same position. So hey, these are, I still say, conversations, because it's about culture, it's about the experience you want, with that employee. Will they prefer to come back to work? If they prefer to come back to work and defer the leave for later, that's not a problem. You come back from work and then do deliver on it. However, if I am struggling with keeping the employees and wondering if people shouldn't go on leave, then that's a different conversation that we're going to have. So for each one, you look at the circumstance and then have those conversations, but we think it from the head. The employer has the right, I've approved your leave, you should go on leave. However, from the heart purpose, what do I want out of this situation?
Quick one, thinking as an employer, is this the same conversation we should have around possibly suspending leave or employment-related benefits to employees? Is it the same line of conversation? So yes, go on leave or don't go on leave, but this is what happens to possible leave allowances and associated benefits. Would you say it's the same?
I would think, I think we've moved into the era of, we used to have a paternalistic relationship between employers and employees. So, I'm your dad, I treat you like a parent. We're moving away, or we've rapidly moved away, because the younger generation is not going to tolerate that from us, and they are not tolerating it in the office. So we've had to rapidly move to engagement. And, these conversations, you'll be very amazed at how much it can bring, because everybody can decide to suspend the leave for the whole year, so that, we can continue to come to work. So nobody really knows, what the possibilities are, unless we sit around that table, have the conversation, put the problem that we have in the middle of the conversation, and then how do we deal with the situation? And I like when Uche was talking about demand, when he was talking about the ILO stimulating demand. If the organization has to survive, what are the new things that we have to do to make this organization survive? And over the years, if our employee engagement strategies have been working and we've been engaging employees, then it's easy. Now, if we haven't been engaging employees, then we need to build the muscles and build the skills to be vulnerable with our employees, lay things out on the table, and have this conversation. There is no ego. You can't put ego in the middle of these conversations. You can't put pride. On the whatever, I'm going to the elephant in the room, which we are not addressing, which is the Access Bank issue. People have, employees are upset, customers are upset, the public is upset, and everything. We only saw the video. We don't know the context of that whole conversation. And so one of the things, I always suspend judgment, not that I ever judge anything. I always suspend judgment until you've seen the whole sides of the story, because we've only seen the videos. So for those who are saying is Access Bank right or is Access Bank, you have not heard their own part of the conversation. You only saw the video. We did not see the conversations that happened prior to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now to the President and Chairman of Council, Wale Adedire. It's a pleasure to have you, sir. And we would like to have your final views and comments on this issue. Thank you so much, sir.
My role is very simple. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
Our dear Barrister Ato, good to see you again. Last time was at the school.
Yes.
And Barrister Kuti, thank you very much.
President, I'm still loyal. I'm still very loyal.
My big sis, that was fantastic. And I like your new look. Our darling CEO, thank you. Thank you for making this happen very quickly.
Hello, sir.
These have been very timely. And you can tell by the attendance that we recorded, 420. That is fantastic. And that's value added.
Actually, we
even crossed 500. We even crossed 500.
And my Zillennial VP is back. TA, thank you.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Presido, we actually recorded 549 at a point.
Fantastic. So very well done. And who else could have anchored such a massive session than our own GT? I know people pay a lot to have you do this, but it's part of the benefit we enjoy, as CIPM. We have loads and loads of talents. Thank you so very much. I've learned a lot.
Thank you.
I've been running between these and other meetings. I'm not working virtually, as you can tell. Some of us have to make sure there is food on the table. While you guys work at home, we have to physically run the factories and make sure the foods are being produced. So we thank all of you. I'm sure our members are very good. We asked the 500 plus of them to share their experiences in the last a couple of hours with you and reading through their comments on the chat, in the chat room, I can say that these have achieved the vision. Thank you, thank you, thank you. One key message for me is it's a balance. It shouldn't be one or the other. It should be both. The organizations that we work for have some reasons for existing. We as human beings, workers, we have reasons for accepting to work for our organizations. It has to be mutual, symbiotic, give and take decision and understanding. A lot has been said about Access Bank. Thanks to the wisdom of my big sis, she said, I suspend judgment until I have all the facts. As far as I am concerned, what's important at this difficult period is that every employee represents a family, and that family must survive this pandemic. It's difficult to receive a bad news of being fired, even when the times are good, even when they're not there. How much more difficult can it be at a time like this when people are not even sure of what could happen to their health? So we need to support our people, and for our people as well, they need to support the businesses. The businesses must exist for us to have the benefits that we desire. That is why, for me, it has to be a balance. We must show that humane, human part of HR at this difficult period. We must support people. If it comes to taking the unavoidable decision of laying people off, it must be done in a way that helps them to manage the pain and sees them through the pandemic. And I think those are the messages I've heard from everyone that have been on the platform today. It's not a legal relationship alone. It's a social relationship. We cannot build everything on the legal. We have to build it on the human social relationship as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You've loaded us with a lot to chew and digest, and our job becomes easier, though we now see that the burden we are carrying is heavier. Thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you, GT.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. God bless you. A few comments from me. I mean, a special thanks to everyone who has been on the panel. I've learned a lot. You've made it easier for me. This is just part one. Tomorrow, same time, we're having a conversation around reopening. What are the health and safety concerns? What should we be doing as employers of labor? What should we be doing as HR people? We know that a number of people maybe decided to not resume back to work yesterday. We're just going to watch, and going by the things we've seen on TV and on social media, the concerns are a bit more heightened. So please, let's watch out again. Tomorrow is going to be another interesting time. Follow us on all our social media channels for more updates and feedback. And we are putting out a number of materials that will be helpful in these times. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll ask Registrar CEO, last words, last comment to everyone.
Thank you, GT, and thanks to everyone. You've been an amazing audience and a wonderful panel. I want us to leave with one word in our minds, at the back of our minds: empathy. In all we do, we need to balance the perspectives of the different players in this emerging drama, this world we are living. As our president said, we must balance the perspective of the employee, we must balance the perspective of the employer, and do what is right by all parties, which means engagement, conversations, and mutually beneficial outcomes for the various parties. Empathy is key. Put yourself in the shoes of the other person as we take the decisions that we must take to survive and in the future to thrive. COVID-19 is a temporary incident. It will go and the world will continue. The pandemic of 1918 came and it went and the world went on. And here we are today. So shall it be also after COVID-19. And the question that we must think about is, what is the legacy? What is the memory that we want to leave behind as individuals and as organizations? Empathy is very, very important. Thank you very much. Do enjoy the rest of your day and see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow, 1 o'clock.